My daughter told me I wasn't welcome at her house for Christmas because I would embarrass her in front of her husband's family. She said it as if she were setting a boundary with a stranger, not the man who taught her to ride a bike in the church parking lot on a Sunday afternoon when the world felt big and forgiving. It hurt because she meant it, and because she sounded practiced. Dad, Emily repeated, slower, as if carving each word into the table between us. I'm asking you not to come. You're not asking, I said. You're telling. A quiet hiss left her, like the steam when a pan hits cold water. If I don't put it plainly, you'll pretend you didn't hear me. I heard you. I stared at the empty coffee mug on my workbench, the ring it had left on the maple top, the ghost of heat. The shop smelled of cedar shavings and old varnish. What I'm not hearing is a reason that belongs to you. It is my reason. She sighed, softer now, and I could hear kitchen noise behind her. The hum of a fridge, the ping of a spoon against a glass. Ryan's parents they're very traditional. Formal. We're having a sit-down dinner. I want everything to feel right. You mean quiet. Respectable, she corrected. Dad, you don't always fit. I finished for her. She didn't disagree. You joke when you're nervous. You talk too much about your job, the school, the woodshop. You get loud. I get passionate. About the things I love. I caught myself, jaw tightening. Name one time I embarrassed you. There was my graduation. I clapped, I said. Everyone clapped. You whistled. Because you were valedictorian. I still felt the ache in my palms from that day, from how hard I'd slapped them together. And because I'm proud. Before we continue, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Eddie Graham from Stockholm. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. On the line, Emily waited me out. She'd learned that from me. How to let silence do the work. It was a bitter gift to hear it used like this. I'm not having this fight, Dad, she said finally. I'm trying to avoid one. My fingers rolled the cool oval of the silver cufflink in my pocket, thumb finding the old groove near the hinge. It was my father's, the only piece of him I took when we cleaned out his house. He'd tell me stories with that cufflink ticking against the rim of his glass, the little sound as familiar as his voice. When Emily was small, she'd sit on my knee and twist it until my wrist went numb. Years later, she pressed her ear to my chest just to hear it tap against a shirt button, like a shy heartbeat. She used to ask, when I'm big, can I wear it? I used to say, you'll be too fancy for this old thing. Listen, Emily said, and her voice softened, a dangerous thing. No one's mad at you. Then why am I the problem? The words came out level. I was proud of that. You know what I'm like. So do you. Is this really about me, or about what people might think of you because of me? Please, don't do this. She gulped air. I can't. Ryan's family, they've never what? Never had chaos at holidays. I let out a short laugh. Chaos is what you called those nights we made too many cookies and ate half the dough. That's the metric now. Dad, she said it like a warning and a plea, and it hit me in the ribs. I stepped away from the bench and looked at the photo stuck into the mirror above my tool chest. The one of Emily at 8 with bangs she cut herself, holding a crooked birdhouse we built together. Her front teeth were in limbo, the new ones too big for her mouth, and she was grinning like she'd invented a new kind of house. I used to think love like that soldered things in place. Turns out there are joints even heat can't keep from cracking. You're ashamed of me, I said. There it was, blunt and ugly under fluorescent light. She sucked in a breath. That's not fair. It's accurate. It's my dinner, she snapped. The softness vanished. My house. My rules. And I don't want you there. We both heard the fracture. I could almost see the words on the floor between us, sharp as glass. There wasn't any accident in the way she'd stacked them. I'll drop your gifts on the porch, I said. Don't, she said fast. We're not doing gifts with you this year. It took me a beat to understand, and then it took me another to say nothing I'd regret. I made something for you. My voice had gone thin. Dad, I'm trying to create peace, she said. Please don't make this hard. I pressed the cufflink hard into my palm until its edge bit skin. I guess I'm outvoted. It's not a vote. Seems like it is. There's no reason to turn this into a spectacle, she said. Let's be adults. You can come by next week. We'll do something just us. After you've put on the show, I said quietly. Her silence this time wasn't patience. It was a door. Good night, Dad, she said. Good night, Em. I kept my voice steady until the line clicked dead. Then I let the shop have it. One sharp exhale, a cough that wasn't a cough. The radio on the shelf above the clamps muttered about traffic on the interstate and the chance of flurries, and I turned it off because even the noise hurt. The gift for her lay on the assembly table under a square of linen, a cutting board of maple and walnut with a bow tie inlay I'd cut by hand. On the underside, I'd carved a line only we would see. To the girl who made my hands useful. Love, Dad. It had the clean weight of something well-made and not fancy. I'd planned to stack it with the store-bought things. Pajamas, a scented candle I didn't understand, tickets to that play she pretended she liked. Now it looked like I'd made something to insult her with. I sat on the stool and let my hands move because that's how I keep from saying the wrong thing. I sorted sanding pads by grit, something I only do when I'm a breath from spitting a truth I can't take back. I sharpened a chisel I'd sharpened yesterday. I put a drop of oil on the cufflink hinge and worked it back and forth until the motion softened, until the squeak became a whisper. When I finally went inside, the tiny house felt like a stage set. A tree leaned in the corner, pre-lit, the kind of thing I used to make fun of until I got tired of cursing at tangled strings. One ornament hung on it, the little red wooden bird Emily painted in second grade and left on my pillow with a note, "For your tree when I can't." I'd never told her that when she moved out, I slept with that bird in my hand for a week. I set the cufflink on the counter next to my keys and poured water into the kettle. My phone lit up again. A text from Emily, a long block that tried to sound like compromise and landed like policy. Hey, just to reiterate, it's really important to me that tomorrow is smooth. I know you want to help, but the best way to do that is to give us space. I'll call you Monday. Love you. A heart. It felt like the kind you draw in the corner of a middle school notebook when you don't know what else to say. I typed nothing. I put the phone face down and listened to the kettle boil, the thrum, and then the sudden scream. I turned the burner off before it shrieked. My chest had that tight, wrapped feeling, like someone had cinched a strap around me when I wasn't looking. You don't make scenes, I told myself. You never have. But there's a line between respecting someone's wishes and letting them write you out of your own life. I slept badly and woke early, a habit that predates Emily and the in-laws and expectations. In the gray before daylight, I wrapped the cutting board in thick brown paper and tied it with twine. I tucked the other titles away. The pajamas, the candle, the play tickets. I left those in a bag by the door because I was honest enough to know I didn't buy them for her. I bought them for the idea of her, the one who still needed me to make the world stable. The cufflink rolled toward the edge of the counter as if it had somewhere to be. I caught it and slid it into the pocket of my shirt. The metal found its old hollow above my heart like it had been installed there. I told myself I was just going to drive past. I told myself I could look at her house in daylight and still choose to keep peace. I told myself a lot of things that were polite lies, the kind people forgive easily because they're convenient. The drive took 15 minutes if I caught the lights. I caught every one. The sky had that hard, white glare that says snow without delivering, and I gripped the wheel too tightly and loosened it because grip doesn't change the weather. Houses wore wreaths like they dressed up for a photograph. Emily's street smelled like fireplaces and someone's cinnamon. I parked 2 houses down and sat there with the engine ticking and my breath fogging the windshield in a slow rhythm. From where I idled, I could see movement through Emily's front window. The smudge of people stepping in and out of frame, the rise and fall of hands. A shape I guessed was Margaret crossed with a tray, her spine straight, posture that said she'd brought etiquette like armor. Another figure, bald at the crown, shoulders like a question mark, was probably Margaret's husband. Ryan stepped into view for a moment, head bent, laughing at something off-screen, and I knew the timbre of that laugh from the videos Emily sent me after their engagement. Restrained, careful, clean-edged. I reached into the paper bag on the passenger seat and felt the board's solid corner. Drop it and go, I said aloud. My voice was rough, like I'd yelled in my sleep. The sidewalk was wet without being slick. I walked up her path like a man who had a good reason. The wreath on her black door was neat and symmetrical, the bow perfectly tied. Last year, she'd asked me to help her hang it. This year, there was no string of lights tracing the trim to the left, because I hadn't been on that ladder. I set the wrapped board on the doormat, then picked it up again because the doormat said, "Welcome," and I refused to let the universe make a joke at me. I held the weight of it in my hands and considered putting it behind the planter, tucking it away like a secret. I imagined her finding it later, alone, when the house smelled like dishwater and leftover roast, when she was tired enough to read the underside and feel something she couldn't show. That was the kindness play. That was the invisible father routine. I'd done enough invisible for this lifetime. I knocked. The sound surprised me, how hard it cracked. Inside, the choreography faltered. Someone laughed to cover it. I knocked again. This time the laughter stopped altogether. I adjusted my shoulders and breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth, like the physical therapist taught me after the accident years ago, the one that left my knee predicting rain. Footsteps approached, quick and light. My heart made an old, foolish leap. The cufflink pressed warm against my skin. The door swung open. Emily stood there in a red sweater and an apron with flour on it, cheeks bright from kitchen heat. For a half second, she wore the smile she must have been carrying for everyone else. The bright hostess curve, teeth, eyebrows lifting. Then her gaze found me. The smile died so fast it felt like a slap. She didn't blink. "Dad?" she said, not moving aside. "What are you doing here?" The words weren't a question. They were an accusation wearing a thin coat of manners. "I came to bring you this," I said, holding up the wrapped cutting board. My voice was steady, but the warmth in my chest was not pride. It was the cufflink, heating like it had absorbed my pulse. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to my face. "We talked about this. I remember." I didn't move to leave. Behind her, I could hear the muffled rise of voices. Laughter, clinking glasses, chairs sliding against hardwood. A shadow passed in the hallway, a tall shape with a drink in one hand. "Ryan." "Emily," he called. She half-turned, her body angled just enough to block me from view. "I'll be right there," she said brightly, then dropped her tone back to a low hiss. "You can't be here. Not today." "I'm already here," I said. Her jaw tightened. "Do you want to make this harder than it already is?" I took a breath slow. I didn't come to start trouble. I came to give my daughter a gift. If you don't want me to stay for dinner, fine. I'll leave after. I don't want a scene. "Then don't make one," I said. For a moment, she looked at me the way she did as a teenager when she'd been caught in a lie. Still, eyes sharp, calculating the shortest path out. Ryan's voice came again, closer this time. "Emily, who's at the door?" Before she could answer, he stepped into the entryway. His expression shifted from polite curiosity to something tighter when he saw me. Surprise, yes, but no annoyance. "Hey, Daniel." "Ryan," I said, nodding. He looked between us. "You're here." "That's obvious," Emily said, forcing a small laugh. "I brought something for Emily," I said, holding up the wrapped board. "Didn't realize gifts were on the restricted list this year." Emily shot me a look sharp enough to splinter wood. "Dad." But Ryan stepped forward, took the package from my hands. "Come in." Emily stiffened. "Ryan, what?" he asked, frowning at her. "It's Christmas." He came all this way. I crossed the threshold before she could argue. The entryway smelled faintly of rosemary and roasted meat. Shoes were lined up neatly against the wall. A small table held a row of holiday cards, most with calligraphy names. My card wasn't there. From the dining room, voices rose again, Margaret's clipped, controlled tone, then a deeper male laugh that I guessed belonged to Ryan's father. Emily leaned toward Ryan. "We agreed. I didn't agree to shut my father-in-law out on Christmas Day," Ryan said evenly. "Especially when he's standing right here." Margaret appeared in the dining room doorway. Tall, silver hair swept into a knot, a string of pearls at her neck. Her gaze went from Ryan to Emily to me, resting there a beat longer than politeness required. "Daniel," she said, voice smooth but assessing. "We weren't expecting you." "Seems to be the theme," I said. One corner of her mouth lifted, whether amusement or curiosity, I couldn't tell. Well, you're here now. She turned back toward the table. Make room for one more place setting. Emily's hand twitched at her side. Mom, she started, then caught herself. Margaret, but Margaret was already gone. The conversation decided without her input. Ryan gestured toward the living room. Why don't you sit for a bit? We're just about to start. Emily's voice was low, tight. You should leave before this gets ugly. I met her eyes. It's already ugly, Em. I'm just here to see it in person. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Margaret's voice floated from the dining room. Daniel, would you like red or white? I smiled faintly. Red, thank you. Emily looked like she was swallowing something bitter. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the cinnamon on her breath. You have 10 minutes, she whispered. If you're still here after that, I'll make sure you regret it. Her tone was soft, but her eyes were sharp as the chisel I'd honed yesterday. I didn't answer, because just then, Ryan touched my arm and said quietly, We need to talk. Now. His tone made it clear he wasn't siding with Emily. Ryan's grip wasn't forceful, but it was definite, guiding me toward a side hallway that branched off the living room. We passed a coat rack heavy with wool and a framed photo of Emily and Ryan on a beach, both of them windblown and happy. I remembered that trip. I hadn't been invited. He opened a door into a small den. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and had the kind of furniture you don't actually relax in. Once the door clicked shut, Ryan leaned back against it, arms crossed. I'm glad you came, he said. That wasn't what I expected. Your wife doesn't share the sentiment. He exhaled through his nose, slow, like he was weighing every word. I've been hearing about you for years, Daniel. And I don't mean stories that make you sound like a bad guy. More like cautionary tales. Emily's version of events. I waited. He continued. She told me you had a temper. That you made every family gathering about you. That she had to manage you so you wouldn't embarrass her. The last part stung more than I wanted to show. Manage me. I repeated, tasting the phrase. Thing is, Ryan said, I've never seen it. And I'm starting to think maybe there's more to the story. I studied him. This man my daughter had chosen, who was now choosing his words like a craftsman fitting joints without glue. You ever ask her for specifics? She gave me one. Said there was a blow-up when she was in high school. Something about a school event? She said you yelled at her in public, made a scene, and afterward you stopped being invited to certain things. I felt the cufflink warm against my chest. That's not how it happened. Ryan's gaze sharpened. Then how did it happen? I leaned forward in the stiff chair. Her friends set her up. It was supposed to be a prank, but it went too far. I stepped in before it turned into something worse. She was humiliated anyway, and she blamed me for being there to witness it. She's been rewriting the ending ever since. Do you have proof? Maybe, I said. She tried to throw out a box once. Old letters, photos. I kept it. There's a note in there she wrote to me after that night, thanking me for stepping in. She even said I was her hero. Ryan's eyebrows lifted. That's not the version I've been told. No kidding. He rubbed his jaw, thinking, if you have that note, it's at my place, I said. It could change how the rest of the family sees this. I nodded slowly. That's why she's so desperate to keep me out of the picture. If I'm not here, there's no risk of her version getting challenged. There was a sound outside the door, a faint creak of a floorboard. Ryan noticed it too. He stepped over, swung the door open. Margaret stood there, hands folded neatly in front of her, eyes cool but curious. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, she said, which meant she had been. But I think I've heard enough to check that story myself. She smiled, just a little. Daniel, I believe dinner is about to get very interesting. Margaret didn't wait for me to answer. She pivoted on her heel, the pearls at her neck catching the light, and swept toward the dining room like a judge returning to the bench. Ryan gave me a quick, unreadable glance before following. I stepped in behind them, the air shifting as the den's quiet gave way to the hum of conversation and the faint clink of silverware being arranged. The dining table was long and narrow, a dark polished wood, set with crystal and china in precise symmetry. Candles burned low in silver holders, their flames twitching when I passed. I could feel eyes on me. Emily's father-in-law, Arthur, with his weathered hands folded neatly in front of him. Two of Ryan's sisters, who wore matching expressions of polite confusion. Emily emerged from the kitchen with a platter of roast, her smile so forced it was practically an injury. "Look who's joining us," she said, her tone bright enough to cut glass. Margaret took her seat at the head of the table. "We've made room," she said. "Daniel will sit here." She gestured to the place beside her. Emily hesitated, her knuckles tightening around the platter's edge. "That seat's it's for Daniel now," Margaret said, with a finality that could have ended wars. I slid into the chair, setting my wrapped gift discreetly on the floor beside me. Ryan sat opposite me, his eyes steady on Emily. Dinner began in that brittle, over-polished way. Platters passed with clipped "please" and "thank you," utensils clinking against china. Emily tried to steer conversation towards safe territory. "Arthur, didn't you say you were reading that history of, Daniel?" Margaret interrupted smoothly. "Emily tells us you taught woodworking for years." "I still do," I said. "High school. Most of my students don't care about dovetail joints, but they know how to use their hands. That's something." Arthur chuckled. "Hands-on work builds character." "My father used to say," Emily cut in. "Dad has stories. Lots of them." She put her fork down, smiling in a way that wasn't a smile. "Especially about family holidays." There it was, the first dig. Not overt, but sharp enough to draw blood if you knew where to look. "True," I said, matching her tone. "Some of the best memories I have are from holidays. Baking too many cookies. Making lopsided ornaments. Remember the bird you painted when you were 8? Red, with that crooked beak?" Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Vaguely. I still have it," I said. The sisters glanced at each other. Ryan kept eating, but his jaw tightened. Margaret sipped her wine, her eyes moving between us like she was tracking a chess game. Emily tried again, this time with a sharper edge. "Of course, not every holiday was picture perfect. Some were chaotic. My friends still remember one in particular." "Do they?" I asked. "Funny. I remember a few where you came to me in tears, and I had to." "That's enough," she said quickly. "No need to dredge up old drama." Margaret set down her glass. "Sometimes old drama is worth revisiting, if it helps us understand the truth." Emily's smile thinned. Margaret," I said softly, "let's not ruin dinner." "Oh, we're not ruining anything," she said. "We're just clarifying." The tension built with each course. Emily kept dropping little barbs. About overblown reactions, about knowing your audience, about some people not understanding how to behave at a formal table. I responded with calm anecdotes, small, pointed corrections that landed just enough to make her blink. Then, as dessert plates were cleared, Emily's mask slipped. She slammed her fork down, the sound sharp as a hammer strike. "Fine," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "Should we just tell them all what you really did?" Every conversation at the table stopped. Every eye turned to me. The room held its breath. The only sound was the faint tick of the clock above the sideboard. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to hear the silence she'd just created. Emily leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. "Tell them about the winter formal. Tell them how you screamed at me in front of half the school. How you embarrassed me so badly I couldn't show my face for months." Her voice trembled. Not with sadness, but with the thrill of control. She thought she was about to bury me. I reached into my shirt pocket, feeling the familiar curve of the cufflink. The metal was warm now, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I placed it on the table in front of me. Arthur frowned. "What's that?" "My father's cufflink," I said. "It's been in my family for 60 years. Emily used to love it. She'd twist it in her fingers at Christmas dinners when she was little." Emily's face hardened. "What does that have to do with?" I pressed my thumb against the small groove at its base and popped it open. A thin compartment slid free, revealing a folded scrap of yellowed paper. I unfolded it slowly. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the note Emily gave me the night of that winter formal." Her eyes widened, just for a heartbeat, before she masked it. I read aloud. "Dad, thank you for saving me tonight. I know I was mad, but you stopped them from making me a joke. You're my hero. I love you." The words hung in the air. Ryan's fork slipped from his hand. Margaret's gaze shifted to Emily, cold and sharp as a chisel. Arthur leaned back, his eyes narrowing. That's not how I remember it, Emily said quickly. I must have forgotten. I offered. Or rewritten it to make yourself the victim? Her cheeks flushed crimson. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Margaret said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. You've been telling this family a version of events that isn't true. Ryan spoke quietly, but the weight in his voice was unmistakable. Why? Emily's eyes darted between us, looking for an escape. Because, she stopped, swallowed. Because it was easier than admitting I was the one who messed up. And if I said it was Dad's fault, nobody asked more questions. Nobody moved. Then Emily pushed her chair back so fast it scraped the floor. She stood, fists tight at her sides. I'm not doing this here. She walked out, her heels snapping against the hardwood. The sound faded as she climbed the stairs. Margaret stood too. I'll talk to her. She followed her daughter-in-law out of the room, closing the door behind them with a soft, deliberate click. The rest of us sat in the charged silence, waiting to hear what would be said upstairs, and knowing nothing would be the same when that door opened again. The house had a strange stillness, the kind that comes after a storm, but before you know if it's truly over. From upstairs came muffled voices, Margaret's steady, clipped tone, Emily's sharper and more desperate. I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm, accusation, counterpoint, pause, retreat. No one at the table moved. Ryan stared at his untouched dessert, fingers drumming once on the rim of the plate before going still. Arthur took a slow sip of his wine, his eyes on me over the glass. The sisters exchanged quick, tight glances like they were silently agreeing not to speak. I didn't look at any of them. My eyes stayed on the cufflink in front of me, the little compartment still open, the note folded neatly inside again. I pressed it closed with my thumb and slid it back into my pocket, feeling its reassuring weight against my chest. The stairs creaked. Margaret descended first, her heels deliberate on the wood. Emily followed a few steps behind, her face pale, lips pressed so tightly together they'd gone colorless. Margaret resumed her seat at the head of the table. She placed her hands on the polished surface and looked around the room before speaking. Emily, she said, her tone even but unyielding, has admitted she misrepresented past events to this family. She allowed certain narratives to go unchallenged because they served her. That ends tonight. Arthur's brows lifted slightly, but he said nothing. Emily's voice was small, barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. It wasn't meant for me. It was for the room, for optics, for whatever damage control she thought was still possible. Margaret's gaze stayed locked on her daughter-in-law. You owe Daniel an apology. Emily's shoulders rose and fell. She turned toward me, but didn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, she said again. I let the silence stretch until she had no choice but to look at me. For what? Her jaw tightened. For lying. For making you out to be someone you're not. It wasn't much, but it was more than I expected. I gave a single nod. Margaret leaned back, satisfied. Good. Now, we will finish this dinner without any more distortions. The rest of the meal passed in a subdued quiet. Emily spoke only when necessary. The sisters kept their eyes on their plates. Arthur asked me a few polite questions about my work, and Ryan listened to every word I said like he was filing it away. When the last plates were cleared, I stood. Thank you for the meal, I said to the table, then to Margaret specifically. And for the clarity. You're welcome here, Margaret said. Always. Emily flinched at the word. I walked toward the front door, my coat draped over my arm. Ryan caught up with me in the entryway. He held out the wrapped cutting board. She doesn't deserve this right now, he said quietly. But you should give it to her when you're ready. Or keep it. It's yours until she earns it. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the cufflink. And this, next year, you'll wear it at the head of the table. I took it, feeling its familiar weight in my palm. We'll see, I said. The night air hit me as I stepped outside, cold enough to make my eyes water. I stood on the porch for a moment, the sound of muffled voices resuming inside. The cufflink was warm in my hand. I slipped it back into my pocket, the metal resting over my heart like it belonged there. As I walked to my truck, the wreath on the door swayed slightly in the wind, its bow perfectly tied, untouched. This Christmas wasn't the one Emily had planned, but it was the first in years that told the truth. And that was a gift worth keeping. If you enjoyed this story of truth and redemption, hit that like button, subscribe for more gripping revenge tales, and drop a comment telling me, what would you have done if you were Daniel? See you soon in the next story.